He said it while buttering his toast, not looking at me, not raising his voice, just spreading the butter with slow, practiced strokes and adding, casually, "You're not even worth the effort anymore. Can't believe I wasted 15 years on someone so mediocre." I kept eating. That was the strange part. My hand didn't freeze. Fork didn't fall. I didn't feel heat in my face or a rush in my chest. I chewed my eggs, swallowed, reached for my coffee. The words landed and nothing happened. For a few seconds, I thought maybe something was wrong with me. Outside, the neighbor's gate slammed. A motorcycle passed. The kettle clicked off. Morning continued as if nothing important had been said. Watched the way he folded his napkin, the way he checked his phone, the way he assumed I would still refill his cup. I did. Later, left for work, he kissed my cheek out of habit. I stood in the kitchen holding a sponge, staring at the same spot on the wall where I'd once taped our first electricity bill, proud that we were finally officially living together. 15 years. It wasn't the cruelty of the sentence that stayed with me, was how familiar it felt. I remembered other mornings. "You're too sensitive. You wouldn't survive without me. At least I put up with you." Always translated those into something softer. Stress, fatigue, bad mood. I had been fluent in excuses. That day didn't translate. I just let the sentence remain what it was. Over the next week, nothing changed on the surface. I cooked, I cleaned, replied when spoken to. I nodded at stories I'd heard before. But inside, something had gone quiet. Not numb in a dramatic way, more like the sound of machinery shutting down after running too long, a deep internal hum switching off. I started noticing things. How every account was in his name. How my salary went into expenses, but went into investments. How every important document lived in his drawer. Introduced me as my wife. She handles the house. Even when I managed our taxes and appointments and paperwork. Infrastructure, invisible until removed. One afternoon, while he watched television, I sat at the dining table and opened my laptop. I told him I was organizing photos. I wasn't lying. I just wasn't telling the whole truth. Requested bank statements, downloaded pay slips, scanned certificates, saved emails, not in a rush, not with shaking hands, with the calm focus of someone finally paying attention. At night, lay beside him listening to his breathing and wondered when loyalty had become self-neglect. I remembered promising, years ago, I would never abandon him the way his father had abandoned his mother. Was I breaking that promise now? Or was I finally keeping one to myself? Some days, guilt pressed against my ribs. I almost told him, almost explained, almost asked him to take it back. Then I would remember the toast, the butter, the ease, and I stayed quiet. Didn't notice my withdrawal at first. I stopped reminding him about deadlines. Stopped fixing his mistakes quietly. Stopped covering for him socially. Stopped cushioning his temper. He grew sharper without his buffer. At a family dinner, mocked me in front of everyone for forgetting a detail about his work. I smiled politely and said nothing. My mother looked at me with concern. He mistook my silence for surrender. A month later, he announced he was planning to expand his business. "We'll use our savings," he said, already confident. I nodded. Inside, something settled into place. 2 weeks after that, he received an email from our bank. So did I. Because 3 months earlier had quietly opened my own account, redirected my income, consulted a lawyer, reviewed every shared obligation, not secretly, legally, calmly. The meeting with the mediator happened on a Tuesday afternoon, a small office, pale walls, neutral furniture. A woman with kind eyes and a folder thick with papers. He arrived late, annoyed. He thought it was about paperwork. When she explained the separation process, the financial division, the documentation already prepared, his face changed in stages. Confusion, amusement, irritation, then something close to fear. "You planned this," he asked me afterward in the hallway. I looked at him. "I prepared," I said. It was the first honest sentence I'd spoken in weeks. He tried to negotiate. Not kindly. He minimized, blamed, rewrote history. "You're overreacting." "I didn't mean it like that. You'll regret this." I listened. Not because I needed to, because I no longer needed to interrupt. The authority was already in the room, in the documents, in the timelines, in the signatures. Control had moved. Not with shouting, with folders. The following months were messy. He struggled. More than he expected. The business stalled without the shared money. He had to sell things, move apartments, ask relatives for help. I struggled too. Smaller place, tighter budget, lonelier evenings. Freedom isn't comfortable at first. It feels like standing in wind without shelter. Sometimes I cried in the shower, not for him, for the woman who had eaten those breakfasts for years, translating insults into endurance, for the time I would never get back. But I didn't go back. One evening, almost a year later, I sat alone in a small cafe near my office, notebook open, my phone silent. I was planning a trip, just for myself, nothing extravagant, somewhere quiet. The waitress brought my tea. I thanked her. My voice sounded steady. Outside, people hurried past, carrying their own private stories, their own unspoken exits, their own delayed courage. I wasn't triumphant. I wasn't bitter. Was simply no longer waiting for permission to exist. And that felt enough.